All right, welcome back, everybody. Today's topic is a little different. We're going to look at an essay that Michael Anton wrote on an imaginary dialogue he had with himself and a woke interlocutor named Malcolm, although Anton calls himself Tom. And the subject of this dialogue is the separation of red and blue territories, not just states, but territories, into separate nations, if you like. In other words, a secession without civil war. It's an interesting dialogue. He argues the case for the dissolution of empire as best he can. But I think he's never convincing. And I'm not even sure he convinced himself. We on the reality side of the debate, the red side in Anton's dialogue, will agree with Anton on all of the symptoms of our declining culture, and you should read the article for that. Alone, he's got a lot of good stuff in there. And we can even agree with him on the desirability that we go our own way and let the woke fend for themselves. But they will never let us go. And the side that screeches about and weeps cataracts over colonialism must be our master. There is no point showing them the hypocrisy of this. They eat hypocrisy for breakfast. All must submit to them here and everywhere. Only when all are made to toil under one rule and profess belief in one idea will there be true diversity. They must impose their beliefs. Now, I think Anton, in his heart of hearts, he knows this too, because he puts into Malcolm's mouth most of the reasons the left will never peaceably relinquish power. More on that in a few minutes. But, you know, he gets it to college, the old college try, but unfortunately by invoking nice legalities based on the Articles of Confederation and the Constitution and things like this. Look, friends, if we could reason and have pleasant debates over arcane law with the woke and their undead Diite army, we wouldn't be having this conversation. They're not going to read pieces like Anton's, no matter how tightly argued, and announce, oh, you know, say, the legal reading of these curious historical documents is right. We admit we're flummoxed. We have to let them separate. After all, the words in these documents meant something to those who wrote them. We must respect that. The law is the law. That's just not going to happen. So, Anton, he tries to, he is a big Lincoln fan. He attempts at tossing some Lincolnophilia into the discussion, arguing that the great emancipator of war, when he strangled the life out of the Confederacy, is not at all equivalent to the new Confederacy's longing to escape nouveau Yankee Puritanism. He hinges his argument, this foray, on this claim, quote, the nation was divided on one issue during the Civil War, slavery. Well, I say this is not so, but that doesn't matter. Almost everybody now thinks it is so. And what's that old saying? Perception is reality. If there's any culture that lived by that dictum, we're it. I do not, of course, apply this type of fantastical thinking to Anton, though I do disagree with him on the Civil War, but that's a moot point. Let's just grant his slavery was the sole issue ploy, and let's see how Anton's argument of how we're not now in a similar situation as Lincoln. This is a quote. He has his Tom, it's clearly Anton, he has his character say, the red character say, now, the South in 1860 could not appeal to the right of revolution because the basis for that right of revolution is human nature, the twin principles of equality and consent. Obviously, those are incompatible with slavery. Whatever you want to call it, separation today would not be justified on the basis of the right of revolution, while secession in 1860 was not. That's his first attempt. And he also says, and here's another quote, Lincoln and his followers hated slavery, but everyone except the most radical abolitionists were willing to tolerate it where it existed. They just didn't want it to expand. They had three basic reasons. First, they thought that slavery is simply morally wrong. It's one thing to tolerate it where it exists when it's very difficult to get rid of, but it's quite another to choose it for its own sake or as a positive good, end quote. Well, He expands those arguments. This is just two snippets. You go and read the entire thing. But I think this is a fair gist of it. Look, the woke hate so-called racism, sexism, and you should be making air quotes when you hear these terms: homophobia, transphobia, climate change, and on and on and on. Which, of course, Anton well knows. The woke are not willing to tolerate these in their own ranks, and they certainly are not willing to tolerate them in ours, or those in foreign lands. And what about this equality and consent? Well, that's the consent fallacy. We've talked about this before. And the woke believe in equality, the idea that all are interchangeable, and that the only real differences that exist are caused by accident of birth. And so, all measured differences must necessarily be caused by some kind of discrimination. That's what the woke think. They must export and enforce this mandate, this cancerous egalitarianism. This is, of course, the full and final fruit of the so-called Enlightenment. Well, the passions of anti-slavery were nothing to the combined white-hot emotional turmoil of woke causes. They will never agree that racism, or anything else, should be allowed by deplorables in their own nations, should we be allowed to escape. Secession is even more unjustifiable to our modern Lincolns as it was to the original. Anton has his woke Malcolm admit this. Quote, this is his Malcolm in the dialogue. You want us to agree to a separation so that you can oppress minorities? How can you expect us to agree to that? I shouted there because Anton's got a lot of exclamation points. This is in the dialogue. He's going to trigger the grammarians among you who read it. Anyway, we can't expect the woke to agree that we're allowed to have racism, because racism is nonsense and they define it as anything they want. So Malcolm said the blues will keep us imprisoned, quote, to prevent you from imposing your racist utopia. And that's true. They will. Anton does have a sense of humor about this. Here's a little bit of a quote. Here it's Tom speaking. Okay, if you're worried about how we'll treat minorities, here's a simple solution, Tom said. You take them all. Oh, so we're back to ethnic cleansing, Malcolm said. You just denied you were going to do that. Now the truth comes out. This is, I have to say, truly monstrous. The creation of an all-white state through ethnic cleansing. Well, that's what the woke believe, and he nails that part. There's no question about that. Anton goes on to great pains to deny Malcolm's charges, but even if the newly created red nations would be racial paradises, the horrors the blue leaders would imagine the reds are up to are intolerable to them. We already have ample evidence that it's their imaginations that drive them. Anton, though, is so desperate for his argument, he is willing to have red nations pay the blue Danegeld in perpetuity. Here's another quote from the dialogue. Tom said, but just for the sake of argument, hear me out. Suppose I or someone could convince Red America to pay some kind of reparations as the price of separation. I think it's a terrible idea and expect most Reds would hate it. But just suppose. What then? How much? Malcolm asked. That would be a matter for negotiation, Tom said. I suppose you're proposing some one-time payoff, Malcolm said. But why should you get off that easily? Centuries of racism can't be paid off with a single check. Okay, Tom said, we'll make it ongoing. Sorry. Malcolm isn't buying it either because he doesn't have to. He and the woke just can't abide the idea of racists being racist anywhere in the world, but especially not their cousins. Not only that, of course, but they'll fret, as Malcolm does, of the sexist dystopia that will events in red nations. He brings up The Handmaid's Tale and all this kind of thing. And then there's things like this, too. Here's another quote. Okay, said Malcolm. Here's one last consideration. Absolutely non-negotiable. Climate change. Emissions will kill this planet, and all of us with it. Your red rump state will be a gigantic polluter that will kill us all. We can't allow it. There is no live and let live with you on that issue. Anton, well, this is Anton. You got to hand it to him. He does nail what the woke's opinion on these things, and Anton himself expressing himself over what will certainly be the woke's real life responses finds some relief in reminding Malcolm that, quote, the right of revolution is a fundamental natural right enshrined in the Declaration of Independence. Well, that's true too, but you're not going to get them to believe it. Though, Anton says, and many times, it won't be our side that initiates the violence. With the FBI's help, it can sure be made to look like it, that, though. I guess they could start some new Fort Sumter-like goading of some people like they got for the Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping case or something like that. And, of course, all this is even before considering how the oligarchs would never willingly set free an important source of their wealth. Well, I mean, read the piece. There's a lot of fun to be had armchair generaling as you move the pieces of the once United States into new configurations. For my own part, I will settle for nothing less than Emperor of Michigan, William the Red. I will celebrate. I'm going to separate the Ann Arbor to Detroit corridor as a woke state, and I'm going to let them destroy and eat each other, and then I'm going to move in and reconquer the territory. Para Vinum, friends. Thanks for listening.
Join me in singing this one.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling until then. Who cares about the clouds if we're together? Just sing a song and bring the sunny weather. Happy trails